So Ranchor Prime is an author, artist, and teacher. I have a stack of his books here. I've been reading his books for years. So very excited to finally meet him and have him here. He has written 14 books, all in the realm of spirituality, including Bhagavad-Gita, Talks Between the Soul and God, which is the book we are about to start reading together as a group. He is a direct disciple of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who is the founder of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, which Krishna West is a part of. He has recorded 2 albums of devotional chanting. In 1987, he began working as an advisor for the Worldwide Fund for Nature on Religion and Conservation. He lives in Glastonbury, England, and today he will be speaking on the topic of hearing the voice of God. So I'll hand things over to Ranchor, and I'm going on mute, and it's all yours. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay, hearing the voice of God. I've forgotten because my memory is not so good these days. So I'm very grateful to occasionally hear the voice of God because he reminds me. I'm reminded of hearing a story from way, way back. Srila Prabhupada was, I believe he was in California at the time. And some few devotees who were with him in his room, and they said to him, Prabhupada, how do you know, what to do? How do you always seem to make up your mind very quickly? Because Prabhupada was very decisive. And he said, oh, Krishna tells me. So they said, yes, but Prabhupada, I mean, actually, really, how do you decide when there's a difficult decision? He said, Krishna tells me. So a third time, he said, but Prabhupada, seriously, how do you actually know? And at that point, he became quite stern. He said, Krishna tells me. So I was reminded of that by this title, Hearing the Voice of God, because I do recall as a young Krishna devotee, it wasn't such a easy thing for me to get my head around that some people might actually be able to hear what God is saying. The traditional form of prayer, I was brought up as a Christian, would be to recite or possibly to just say prayers to God. But it's a two-way process. There is an inner voice which we all have access to, actually, to that inner voice. And this is why I guess that's how that title came up. Because in the beginning of the spiritual journey, it may be that I don't really have confidence to hear that inner voice. But really, and so in the beginning, it's very important to have access to, the first point of access is simply to be able to be in the company of people who love God. There's a name for that. It's called sadhu sangha. Sadhu is the saintly person, the peaceful person, and sangha means to be in the company of that person. So sadhu sangha, not maybe just one person, but just like we are doing today, virtually, we're in one another's company. So that's called sadhu sangha. And it kind of awakens something inside me. And after sadhu sangha, what may come is some faith may arise, just by hearing. We're all like that, the company that I keep, the things I hear about, I tend to, they affect my faith. We all have some kind of faith in this world. Some, one person may have faith in, their professional journey, be they, a historian or a teacher or a truck driver, whatever it is. That may be the circle of faith. Or people find their friends and share things. And there's a kind of faith. When a friend tells me something, I might take it a bit seriously. So we all have some kind of faith. In fact, in the Bhagavad-Gita, Krishna says, everyone is made of faith. It's what makes us who we are, some kind of faith. Even if my faith is in a completely materialistic kind of faith, whatever it is I believe in. So if I keep company with sadhu sangha, with persons who have love for God, then I will develop that characteristic and my faith will grow. So I do recall in the very beginning, for me, I was, when I met the Krishna people here in London, not here, I'm in Glastonbury, by the way, that's where I live, which is a small town in Somerset in Western England. And not far from here, about 10 miles away, is the famous Glastonbury Festival. But I'm not at the festival, I'm in a small, ancient pilgrimage town. Yeah. So, when I was a young man in London, I was 20 years old, and I met the Krishna people. And immediately I felt attracted to their company. And my life, of course, began to change. So in the beginning, I don't know if I was ready to hear the voice of God. But after time, over time, in the beginning, it's very important to become familiar with the teachings. Bhagavad-Gita is really the essence of the teachings about Krishna. But also to keep company with the teacher. Now, it was at that time in London, we had this small building in Holborn, just next to the British Museum. It was narrow, but it was 5 or 6 stories high. So it was about half of it was the staircase, forever racing up and down the stairs, But the 3 couples who came over from California and who started that temple, they were still there, and they were really in love with Prabhupada, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. And so they were constantly playing the sound of his voice was always coming over their speaker somewhere or other. And by constantly hearing Prabhupada's voice, I began to really start to feel some attachment to him. And when he eventually came the following summer, we all went to the airport to receive him, and my recollection is he seemed to float. I wasn't really aware of his feet touching the ground, and there was a glow, a wonderful golden glow around him. I spoke to many devotees of Prabhupada because I wrote a book about that whole period. And so I interviewed lots of people. And I discovered a very interesting thing, which is that almost everyone, when they first encountered Prabhupada in person, they saw light shining from him. They saw that. But they all said, we never saw it again, just that first time, which I find fascinating. And I had that same experience, although there was a couple of other occasions when I saw it as well. So at that time, when Prabhupada spoke, it really just, it sounded like, for me, I imagined I was hearing, actually, the voice of God. I never thought Prabhupada was God. He was very strong on that. Do not think that the Guru is God. The Guru is one who serves God. Actually, he said, I'm not the servant of God, I am the servant of the servant of the servant of the servant of God. That's the mood which we learn in Krishna consciousness. People think it's a great thing to be in charge of everyone. Some people think that. To be powerful, everyone will listen to what I say. But the path of bhakti, the path of devotion, is I wish to serve. That's my real sense of who I am. I wish to serve. So in the beginning, to hear the voice, to hear the instructions, to read the books, to share like we are together, something like the Bhagavad-Gita. This is how I start to become awake, really, to my true self. But it may be, and it's a subject of the Gita, which we come across as we go through the Gita, that in course of time I start to hear the inner voice. The inner voice. You know that divine voice is with every one of us all the time. And it may be, I'm guessing, some of you will have had an experience on occasion that you hear some inner direction. And if you're like me, especially when I was a young man, the question arises, is that really a direction coming, from some higher plane, or is it just my imagination? And to learn to tell the difference between my imagination and the true inner voice, that's something, I guess, that can come possibly with experience. Yeah. So yeah, that's Bhagavad-Gita. Now, what I wanted to do was to focus on a couple of verses with you today, which speak about this inner voice. Because ultimately, this journey that we're all on, some of you may be just, putting your toes in the water, some of you may be already some distance in. This journey ultimately is a journey to take me to that place where I can, as Prabhupada said, Krishna tells me. And by the way, when my first encounter with Prabhupada, which was in 1969, it wasn't in the flesh. That's when he arrived in England, and about 4 days after he arrived, he was booked onto a late-night television show, which I used to with my father. At that time, I was 19, and I had left home, but during the summer I'd come back to spend a few weeks. So my father and I were watching this late night sort of arts and intellectual kind of program called Late Night Lineup on BBC. And suddenly this extraordinary man was sitting in the chair, like no one I'd ever in my life seen before. But I instantly felt, oh my gosh, this is a genuine holy man. Even on the TV screen, he seemed to exude that air. So the interviewer introduced him. He said, oh, well, at the moment, this is Swami Bhaktivedanta, and he's staying on John Lennon's estate. That's when Prabhupada first arrived in England. George Harrison had put the question to John Lennon. They need somewhere, to put their guru. And John Lennon had just bought this very nice estate. And so he gave them a little row of gardeners' cottages. And that's where Prabhupada was staying. So he introduced that this man is staying in at John Lennon's estate. And so now he's come here. So he asked the question, he said, so why have you come? And this very saintly man, swathed in robes, very serious and grave, looked very wise. He said, I have come to teach about God, about love of God. So the interviewer said, well, we already know about God here. Is this some other God you come to teach us about? And so this saintly man said, God has many names. There's only one God, but God has many names. So then the interviewer said to him, well, what is it you're going to teach about loving God? And the saintly man replied, I'm going to teach you how you can talk with God face to face, just as you and I are speaking now. My gosh, when I heard that, because I was brought up in a very religious way. I went to school in Benedictine boarding schools, Catholic boarding schools. And so I thought, wow, nobody ever mentioned anything about this before, all these monks and so on teaching me. Talk with God face to face. So then the interviewer asked, so what's your method? How do you do that? And Prabhupada said, you simply chant the name of God. Now when I heard that, I thought, I couldn't have heard that right, because it couldn't be that simple, So I turned to my father and I said, did he just say you just chant the name of God? And my father said, I don't know. But I was intrigued. So then he said to him, so would you like to demonstrate? And immediately at that point, Prabhupada's face lit up with a huge smile and sparkling eyes. He said, yes. And he got up and they walked across the studio, and there were a small number, 4 or 5, of Prabhupada's disciples. And they were sitting on the floor. As one does when you're going to have a kirtan, somebody's got a harmonium and so on, and so you're sitting on the floor. And Prabhupada sat right in the middle of them, on the floor. And in retrospect, it occurs to me, I never saw anyone sit on the floor of a television studio. And in fact, I don't think I've ever seen it since. So then, after a few words, the interviewer particularly, he spoke to a very striking young American man, who I then later realized it was Shyam Sundar, who's a good friend of mine. And I thought to myself, wow, he had, this tilak that devotees wear, these 2 lines coming up, and because his head was shaven and shiny, it went all the way, just kept on going, all the way. And I thought, wow, he looks incredible. I would love to be like that, but I don't think I could ever do that. And then they began to sing. As soon as I heard the chanting, it just entered deep into my heart, and I thought, yes, that is it. That is all you have to do. And I was tuned right in. I just wanted them to go on, but as soon as they finished one mantra, it just faded and they were gone. So I said to my father, wasn't that amazing? And he said, no. So then I realized that it's not for everyone. you know. It's not for everyone. Although we would love it to be. Around that time I became a vegetarian, and I thought, this is wonderful. A friend of mine came and stayed, and in the morning I said to him, so Mick, what do you want for breakfast? Do you like bacon? He said, Richard, you don't eat meat, do you? Well, man, that's really not cool. It's not spiritual. And as soon as he said those words, it was the right time for me, you know. And so I told him, from this day on, Mick, I don't eat meat. So then I thought, this is wonderful. I'm going to tell all my friends. Hey, you can be vegetarian. It's much better. Why don't you be vegetarian? And of course, they just thought I was crazy. And that is how it does tend to be once we realize some of these higher truths. Naturally, we want to share them with others. But not everyone wants to hear. That's the way the world is. So once so by chanting, that was what Prabhupada wanted to say, and I believed it straight away. Just by chanting the name of God, everything else comes from that. So we haven't really sung together, so I'd like to just... Oh, and I should keep an eye on timings here. Okay, it's all... My clock says 3:30, so I'm guessing it's 10:30 where you are. But let's just, for 5 minutes, sing the Hare Krishna mantra, and each of you in your separate space, please do join in. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Now, I had it in mind to share a couple of verses from the Bhagavad-Gita. Now, I do have a document on my computer. We could try doing the share screen thing. Does that work for you? Doing the sharing the screen?
Yeah, I'll just enable it so that you can share. 1 second.
Oh, okay.
I think it should work now.
All right, let's give it a try. If it doesn't work, that's fine. So I click on share screen, don't I? Is that right?
Yes.
Ah, great. So then I'm going to select, this one here. Share. I've got all these other things on the screen. I don't know how to get rid of those. Get rid of those ones. I get rid of that. No. Oop. There we are. Okay. Let's go back to that verse. Here we are. So, Bhagavad-Gita. Can you all see this? Is this working? Okay. Before I go any further, I had meant to say at the start, so luckily I've remembered to say it now, I very much welcome comments and questions. So as we're going through this brief look here, if any thoughts or questions occur to you, please, make a note of them, and in 10 or 15 minutes, maybe you can feed some of them to me, Fred. Yeah, that would be great. So there are 4 verses. Now, my Gita, of course, is in English, and I should just, as a background, I should say that Prabhupada's Bhagavad-Gita, which, here's my copy, which I've had most of my life, and it's a weighty volume, 1,000 pages, full of Sanskrit, with lots of additional references, and it's not a light read. And I've lost track of the number of times people told me, oh yes, I have it at home, but I've never managed to read it. Or I couldn't get up beyond, page 20 or something like that. So it was, through much of my life, I was always thinking it would be wonderful to have a simple edition without any Sanskrit to frighten people away, just setting out the basic principles of the Gita. So eventually I did manage to get it published in, I think, 2003. And it's been through a few different editions, and I realised there now in America you got yet another a recent edition of my Gita. It's got a different cover, but inside it's exactly the same. Yeah. But there's no Sanskrit in it. So what I tend to do is when I teach, I like to share a little bit of the Sanskrit in a simple form. So here's 4 Sanskrit verses. One of the things you might start to notice about the Sanskrit verses in the Gita is they are actually poetry. That doesn't mean they have rhyming endings. That's only one version of poetry. They have a rhythm and a structure, which they almost all of them conform to this. It's sort of like we see here. it's 4 lines, or in fact in the Sanskrit it's 2 lines, but each line has a natural break in the middle. So, for example, the first of these 4 verses, aham, and these can be sung, by the way. And why don't we? And it's very common in India and sometimes in this country here to hear people singing the verses of the Gita. So, aham sarvasya prabhavo matak sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvita. And the whole Gita can be sung pretty much to that song. So there are these 4 core verses. I call them the heart of the Bhagavad-Gita. And it is said that these 4 verses summarize the essence. So let's just look at these 4. And I don't know if are any of you referring to my edition of the Bhagavad-Gita? Do you have it? Oh, you do. I can see something. Yeah. So let's just get the page for this. So it's chapter 10, verses 8, 9. Yeah, it's verses 8, 9, 10, and 11, and it should be on page 106. Does that work for you? Good. Okay. The heart of the Bhagavad-Gita. So the first of these 4 verses, Krishna says, I am the source of all. Everything emanates from me. The wise who know this serve me with all their hearts. Now the great thing about the Gita being in a sort of a poetic form, it means it survives unchanged. It's not like the Bible or the Gospels, the teachings of Jesus, which are available in any number of different editions and different versions, different language, goodness knows. The Bhagavad-Gita is a Sanskrit poem, excerpt from a much longer poem, the Mahabharata. So, aham. Aham means I. Or it means actually I am. Aham, I am. Interesting, you can often see the English connotation with the Sanskrit. Aham means I am. Sarvasya means all of this. And prabhavo means the master or the source. Matak sarvam pravartate. From mata means from me. Again, me and ma in Sanskrit, that syllable ma is often me. So mata, from me, sarvam pravartate, all this comes. It all emanates from me. Iti matva bhajante mam, Buddha bhava samanvita. Buddha means the wise. So you've all heard of the famous wise man called Gautama Buddha. Buddha means wise or wisdom. So the wise persons who know this about me, they iti matva bhajante mam. Bhajante means devotion, and it also means service. The one I love, I give to that person. That's the, genuine love is not just some flowery words or hugs and kisses or whatever. It is caring. The love of the mother for her child. She is always thinking of how to look after her child. So devotion for God is the same. That if I wish to nourish this sense of love, then the way to do it is to practice service. And to serve Krishna is not a difficult thing. In the Gita elsewhere he says, if you want to serve me, give me a flower. It's that simple. Just give me a flower. Or sing my name. Or offer me your food. So many simple things we can do. And ultimately, if I give my loving service to Krishna, it's a bit like watering the root of the tree. It's no good going around all the leaves and trying to water the leaves of the tree. I have to find the root. So Krishna says here, I am the root of everything. Everything's coming from me. So if I give some service to Krishna, I benefit and everyone benefits. Yeah. So I am the source of all. Everything emanates from me. The wise who know this serve me with all their hearts. And then we go to the second of these verses. Mach chitta mad gata prana. Much chitta means, again, ma, it's me, and chitta is one of the Sanskrit names for the mind. So, much chitta, place your mind upon me, with your mind absorbed in me. Mad gata prana. Prana, some of you, if you've ever got involved with yoga, you might have come across this word prana. Pranayam is the breathing practice in yoga and so on. So prana means the life air, the life of the body. It's a subtle energy that goes all through my body. It's what gives me life internally. So Madgata Prana means make me the goal of your life. So these persons who know that Krishna is the source, their minds are always placed on him, that we're always thinking of him, and their whole life energy is focused on Krishna. Bodhayanta parasparam. Bodhayanta is, again, we've had the word already, buddhi is wisdom. So Bodhayanta, they share their insights among themselves. Bodhayanta parasparam. Katayantas chamam nityam. Kata yantas means they talk amongst themselves about me perpetually, all the time. And in the process, I mean, like we're speaking directly or indirectly about Krishna. Tusyanti cha ramanti cha. It means they're tasting great bliss. This is the nature, the inner nature of all of us, is to be happy. That's my nature. It's not something external to me. If I am seeking happiness and joy in my life, it's no good looking outside, This is what the illusion of this world seems to encourage people to think, that, I'm going to find happiness if I do this, or if I go there, or if I succeed at this occupation. But actually, the happiness, the joy, is within. One of the greatest secrets of life is to know that my happiness doesn't depend on what I'm doing or where I am or anything external. It's something which I carry inside. So here Krishna says that those who know that I am the source, they talk about me amongst themselves, and by so doing, they find great joy. It's extraordinary, such satisfaction. So that I'm going to move now to the third of these 4 verses. And here, we've already heard twice the Sanskrit word buddhi, which is wisdom. So here we learn something very profound. Tesham satata yuktanam. That means to those who are always united with me. Yukta, it's similar to the word yoga. Yoga means to connect, to link with God. And yukta is the same. So those who are united with me, bhajatam, priti purvakam, giving me their devotion and their love, filled with devotion and love. Dadami, I give them buddhi yoga. So buddhi yoga, it means the wisdom, the understanding that unites you with me. I give that understanding. Yena mam upayantite, the understanding that leads you to me. So these 4 verses, verse number 1, I am the source of all. And the ones who know this, they talk to one another about this, they enlighten one another. So the ones who know this, they serve me. And then those ones, they talk to one another about me. And then the 3rd verse says, and I give them buddhi yoga. I give them inner wisdom. And finally, tesham evanukam partam, to those persons with great compassion. Aham agyanajam tama. Now, jnana is the Sanskrit word for knowledge, and agyana means ignorance, and tama means darkness. So this is part of our experience in this world, although each and every one of us is an eternal spiritual being. In this world, we encounter darkness. And darkness, literally, it means ignorance. It means losing sight of myself and losing sight of God. So I'm sure all of you, one time or another, have experienced that sometimes darkness can overwhelm me, and I can lose sight of my true self. So then Krishna says, Nashyami Atma Bhavasto. I, living in the heart, I dispel this darkness, Jnana Dipena Bhasvata. And I do it with the Jnana Dipena means the light of knowledge. Deep is the Sanskrit, but also the Hindu word for the light. At Diwali, I don't know if any of you are familiar with this, everyone lights a little candle to welcome Ram back from the forest. So Jnana Dipena means the light of knowledge. Not just but the light that drives away this darkness, which we all have to somehow meet in this world, the darkness. So here's this in the 3rd verse that we have gone through, verse number 10. So if you're looking on your Gita, you'll see the heart of the Bhagavad-Gita, there's 4 verses. So the third one, to those always absorbed in serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. So this buddhi is the Sanskrit word for wisdom, and buddhi comes from God. And if I can, so this inner understanding, we began with hearing the voice of God, okay? So this inner voice is called buddhi. And if I strive to give my devotion to Krishna as much as I'm able, I will start to hear this inner voice, which Krishna says, I give buddhi yoga, the knowledge that will bring you to me. That voice is always there. But in order to hear it, I need to open up my heart. True understanding, and I'm going to clear these verses now from the screen. Stop share. Okay, great. I can see you all again now. True understanding is not to do with the brain. It's not to do with the IQ. It's not to do with what you learn from books or from, teachers in the ordinary sense. That's not true understanding. True understanding is a matter of, well, generally we say in English, the heart. And the heart is the place where the buddhi emanates from, because, as Krishna says elsewhere in the Gita, I dwell in the heart. Every one of us. You could say each of us, our body is a temple. It's a temple. It's a temple of myself, because I am an eternal spirit, but it's also a temple of God. And this inner union, which is called buddhi yoga, in which I can hear the voice of God. It's mystical, but it's also very real, which is why Prabhupada, way back, he said, Krishna tells me. So, when I first heard that story, I thought, well, how's that, what's that like? Is that just a sort of a fanciful way of saying I get inspired? No. God can speak to you, to every one of us. We just have to tune in to hear. And so often, I'm distracted by what's going on in the world. And that is the power of chanting, by the way. If you practice this chanting, and as you probably know, there's different ways of chanting. I mean, you can sit together like we just did, and you can sing, and that's very powerful. Also, I can practice japa, and I just heard from from Fred. Excuse me, my brain. I just heard that some of you practice japa together, which is wonderful. So these are my japa beads. And what Prabhupada asked of his disciples every day to chant 16 rounds. Now, when I met the Krishna devotees, it only took me a few days. Within a week, I decided these are the people I want to be with. Nothing else is important now. I'm prepared to abandon everything, which was not a small thing, because I was doing well at the time. But none of this matters anymore. I just want to be with these people. But then somebody told me, these guys every day they chant 16 rounds, and it takes them hours, on their beads. And I say, oh gosh, I don't know if I could do that. That would be really difficult. But I tried. Well, I struggled to stay awake early in the morning and to chant, and it's a challenge. It's a challenge, but it's a challenge that sometimes brings the most amazing I could say transformation in the heart. This chanting of God's name. So the more I do that, the more I will start to feel this inner connection, and it can never leave me, even and perhaps especially when life is difficult. These are the times, difficult times, when we tend to be more able to hear. And also, being surrounded by so many distractions in this world, endless distractions. If I can teach myself to spend time, ideally, it's generally said the best time is early in the morning. Not everyone can do that. Some people, I know, some people prefer to do it at night. Or even, a quiet moment during the day. But however I can do it, to spend a bit of time just in the company of Krishna. And it is said that the name of Krishna is non-different from Krishna. And when I chant Krishna's name, his name dances on my tongue. Then I will start to hear this inner voice. So I'll finish for now, just with a simple story. It might get through to you that when I'm thank goodness, thank Krishna, I live in Somerset in the countryside, but I used to live right in the centre of London, and beneath my house, 70 feet down in the ground, was the underground train. Now, during the week, I was never aware it was there because there was so much noise, in the middle of the city. Could never hear it. But I noticed on Sunday mornings, when it was quiet, I would hear the rumbling of the train so clearly. And I was thinking, how come all week long I never heard that? Because there was so many other distractions, so much noise going on. But on Sunday mornings, I could always hear the train. And it was a wonderful, peaceful feeling, actually. And it occurred to me, in the same way, this inner voice is always there, never leaves me. But I'm so distracted by the external world and by my thoughts, my endless thoughts. I don't hear that inner voice. So one prayer that a lover of God may pray is, please take away all these distractions, so that I can be with you. Because in the end, none of these things will really fulfill my desires. And in the end, of course, all this has to go. Whereas this inner connection with God, with Krishna, I will never lose. Never lose. So that's a good place to pause. And if any of you would like to, raise a thought or a question, I would really love to hear. Were there any? Did anything come up for anyone? And Fred, remind me. Sorry, I'm awful with names. Your name, although I knew it, but it's escaped me.
The Sanskrit name is Preshta.
Preshta, thank you, Preshta.
I think most
What is
people here know me as Fred.
Oh, okay, all right, Preshta. So perhaps you could find out. Is there anything that came up for any of you?
And nothing came through the chat, but if anyone has a question, please feel free to unmute and ask your question. Or if you're feeling very shy, you can write it in the chat and I can read it. Whatever works for you, but please feel free. Okay, Liz, go right ahead.
Hello, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I just want to say thank you so much for being here today. I'm absorbing so much of what you're saying, and I don't even know where to begin except for maybe you said so many things at the very, very end that really resonated as far as quieting, or trying to limit our distractions, or, just getting to the point where you can hear that quiet voice that's always there. We just don't realize it.
Mm-hmm.
And wishing that for others. So I know, when we pray to Krishna, it's not always, I grew up Catholic, and so a lot of it was like praying to God for this and for that and asking. And then now you're practicing bhakti, it's more, I'm realizing when you're praying, it's more of an offering. And I like to pray for others. And sometimes I'm not really sure what to say, especially in the world today, where it's like, may you be safe, may you be happy. And it's like, well, those are some pretty tall orders. But I really like what you just said about may you have quiet, may your distractions be quieted so that you have an opportunity to hear that small voice that's there. And so I just wanted, that really helped so much.
Yeah, as I said earlier, watering the root of the tree. So I may not immediately know what to ask for someone else, but if I give my love to Krishna, I can actually help everyone. How can I possibly know what is the right thing for another person? That's not my task, actually. My task is to connect with God myself and to try to maybe just allow a little bit of light to shine, that's all. What else can I do? Because in the end, it might not appear to be true, to be so, but the reality is every single one of us is a child of God. And we are being looked after. Even the ones who you might think they're not being looked after, they are. Some of you you have children. One or two of you, I'm sure, do. When I was a young father, somehow or other, we were persuaded we were given tickets to India by a well-wisher. I want you to go to India. So off we went, but we had our son was 15 months old. So, it was a little concerning. He was only very small. Would it be okay? So anyway, off we went, and it was okay. Things worked well. But somehow, while he was there, he picked up an infection. It was actually something called Shigella, which is a version of cholera, which can kill a child. And we didn't know until we got on the plane. And on the plane, on the way back, suddenly he just started to completely fall apart. And so we rushed him into hospital. And on the second day, my wife was incredible. She just spent the whole time with him, night and day, sleeping on the floor next to him, everything. And he was so weak, he couldn't cry. So I was going as much as I could to see him. And one day, the second day I think he was in there, it seemed so bad. And so I had a private word with the doctor. I said, is he going to pull through? And the doctor looked straight at me and said, I can't say. So I thought, oh my gosh, this is the time now to go and pray to Krishna. So at the time I was running the temple was very close by and I was in charge there. So I went round to the temple and I went in front of Krishna with the intention to say to Krishna, Krishna, please cure my son. But as soon as I got in front of Krishna, the words just stopped in my heart. I couldn't say those words because I just felt this absolute certainty coming from Krishna. I guess you could say Krishna spoke to me in my heart. He said that he is completely looked after. You don't need to worry because I am looking after him. And whether he lives or dies, don't worry. So I realized at that time, my only prayer when it comes to the welfare of someone else is to place that person in the hands of God, which they already are. And you know that death is an illusion. There is no such thing as death. It's actually, and of course the Bhagavad-Gita teaches us beautifully about this, death means leaving one place and going somewhere else. That's all. Yeah. There's nothing to fear. Nothing to fear at all. And when the moment comes, it'll all be looked after. It'll all be looked after. So, yeah, praying for other people. The prayer is, please, let me share my love with whomever I meet, and let that one's heart open to your will, dear Lord. Something like that.
Sandra,
Yeah, another.
the question. Sandra, go ahead.
Hare Krishna. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. Hare Bal.
Um, I have two questions, but I'll wait for the other one to ask the other one in case anyone wants to ask a question. In the beginning, you mentioned the word confidence, and you said that sometimes we have to develop confidence in order to hear the words of Krishna. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Confidence. I actually don't remember the context. Can you remember the context in which I said the word?
Remember, you were saying that sometimes we need that confidence in order to be open to hear. And I think it kind of ties into what you just said with the prayer about how I was maybe kind of speculating that it's about opening the heart, kind of being in that receptive mode to hear and receive that love. And sometimes maybe we're not as confident, but this is just a speculation.
Okay. So, yes, as I said, the voice of God is with us all the time. But we may not always feel confident, I guess, to believe it. Is this just my mind talking? As it does. So yeah, I have to learn to be confident that God does talk to me. What can one say? There's no question that the practice of service, giving my service to God, that will open my inner ear, you could say, to hear and to realize. Krishna says in the Gita something very wonderful. I am in the heart of all beings, and from me comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. 3 things. Knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. All these things come from Krishna. And by knowledge, in this point, we're not talking about, as I mentioned earlier, intellectual knowledge, but simply understanding. It's a gift of God. It's a gift. And remembrance. Now, that's a subtle thing, you know. The mind is filled with memories, and I wonder if you've ever experienced that on some particular situation, for no given reason, a memory will suddenly arise. And if I pay attention to it, it can actually be very helpful. You know, the tendency is to think, oh, it's all just coincidence and accident. Nothing's an accident. Nothing is coincidence. The memory is an amazing facility that we have. And ultimately, of course, memories I guess the greatest memory is Krishna. Krishna says in the Gita, remember me. And then the third thing is forgetfulness. Krishna says, I give forgetfulness, which sometimes is necessary, because if I constantly remember all this, well, in different ways. One way that forgetfulness is useful is because of all these difficult memories, you know, which are painful, which I need to forget, and I can't. So Krishna may give me the forgetfulness of those things. And forgetfulness of attachments which are not serving me. Forgetfulness of all the nonsense that there is in this world, and which we end up carrying often in our own minds. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a verse somewhere that says, you know, that the mind is filled with, the word is mal, M-A-L. I don't know if that rings, if any of you are familiar with French. Mal in French, I guess. What does it mean? It means disease, I think, yeah? Am I right? It's one of the meanings, but something bad. Something bad. Mal.
In Spanish, it means bad. Mal. Mal. Bad.
Bad. Okay, there you go. So that's a Sanskrit word. Mal. It's in the Bhagavatam. So we carry, the Bhagavatam says, heaps of mal in the mind, which is accumulated from lifetimes. Oh my gosh. Which is why sometimes, you know, when I switch off from the outer world, suddenly my mind fills with all this negative stuff. I've noticed sometimes people who are not familiar with, I used to sit in a meditation circle, just silence, you know. And so people would come and they'd sit in silence, and halfway through they'd just get up and leave. And sometimes, and once or twice, speaking to those people, I said, "Oh God, it was horrible. I couldn't bear it because my mind was just like filled with all this stuff, and I was in total anxiety by being in silence." Right? Why are we tend to get so addicted to movies and videos and music and books and anything to take my mind away from my daily life, because it's all so painful. But the irony is, all this painful stuff, why is it painful? That's a whole other discussion, but it's it brings me closer to remembering God. Because as soon as I start to remember, and one very good way of doing that is to chant the names of Krishna, then I'm brought back to that inner place of peace and love. So I can't remember how we got into all that, but there you go. Does anyone else have a question? If not, I know Cassandra has another question.
I had a quick question.
Oh, yeah.
When you were telling the story about your son and you decided you wanted to pray to Krishna, I was anticipating you saying that you were going to pray to Krishna to save your child, but then you had the idea to pray to kill the child. And I was.
No, you misunderstood.
Okay.
I certainly didn't pray for that. I realized that. Sorry if that somehow. I realized that he was already completely in the hands of Krishna. I had no need to ask anything, but just to place him in Krishna's hands. Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked me that question, because I would hate to think I prayed for Krishna to kill him.
I wasn't sure if you meant to say that you were going to say, "Please, Krishna, save my child," or if you were going to say, "Don't kill," but you said. Anyway, I was a little confused, and I was wondering where you were coming from with that, so that's why I wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, it's the recognition that I don't need to ask for anything. Yeah. Because all of us are looked after 100%. The only thing I would recommend to ask for, well, a couple of things. Krishna, please let me remember you and let me serve you. That's all. Prabhupada told us that the Hare Krishna mantra is a prayer for service. Yeah. So thank you very much, because that would have been an awful note to end on. Please kill my son. Oh my gosh. Cassandra, you had a question.
To write this book because because of conversations you have with your children. And so I was wondering, I have a 2-year-old son, and I notice his day and his mood, his attitude completely become more, just he becomes more happier, more like he behaves well when I start the day with kirtan, when he participates in our daily worship, and he goes to the Sunday feast. Like, having activities for him every day really help his mood and really help him become more happy. At least that's my observation. I did try TV. I tried TV for a week, like a little show in the mornings just to see. And I felt like just a decline in his mood to service. Just kind of, I saw like just kind of this absence, or just he wasn't really engaged. But so I wanted to ask for your advice on how to keep that kind of going with him where it doesn't, where he kind of finds it some, fun, um, or I'm not sure the question to ask, but if there's any kind of advice that you would like to share from your experience, that would be very helpful on how to incorporate stuff like this.
Yeah, well, of course, as a parent, it's not up to us to be able to. We can't take control of our child's life. When they're small, you can, but in later life, he'll do what he'll do. I'm speaking from personal experience here. However, the most important thing is to express love in everything I do. I don't know if you're familiar at all with Carl Jung. I guess you will be a little bit. So he spoke about something very interesting. He said the home, every home, has silent walls. I don't know if any of you have ever heard that expression, the silent walls. The silent walls reflect to the child whatever is happening in the lives of the parents. Yeah. In other words, you may not express it directly, you may not say whatever it is you want to say to your child, but silently, everything you do, all that you are, is being reflected to the child. So, what can we do? Live with truth, honesty, and love. That's the most important thing. And each of us, Krishna in your heart will inspire you in so many ways what you can give in different ways. But the essential thing is to live with love and truth, and that will have a profound effect on your child. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Mm. So we can. What should we do now, Presta? Fred?
Well, does anybody else have any questions or comments? I want to make sure someone might have a question but be a little timid. But if you just want to give another moment for someone to speak up and ask a question, well, you have a good opportunity here. So I'll give a moment for that.
Well, is there someone
I
there?
I just have a comment. I'm at work, so I apologize. I when you said the thing about the stillness when people, you don't notice the sounds. I've been teaching antarmona, inner silence, recently, and I can see when I ask people to listen to the sounds far away and sort of bring the object to their mind, how hard it is for people. I can see them moving around, and without having that time to think about those things, your mind's never going to get still. And so I thought, what a lovely sentiment, the end of your the end of your lecture. I thought it was so beautiful, so thank you so much for this.
That I know that meditation you're speaking of. It's a wonderful meditation to listen to the sounds far away and nearer, right? Eventually to listen even to the sound of my heartbeat. It's possible. So let me just share something with you. Years and years ago, when I was a young man, I was invited by a vicar to speak to his yoga group. I mean, this was back in the early 80s, I think. So it was an unusual situation. And it was a room full of people. So I did what I always do, which is I had my tambura. I don't know if you know, it's a stringed instrument, beautiful sound. I had that with me. And so I said, okay, we're going to chant Hare Krishna. And I taught them how to chant. And we all chanted. And he was, of course, teaching them sort of impersonal meditation. But we sat in a circle, and they all joined in chanting. And at the end, there was silence. And he didn't want to break the silence, so we just sat in a circle with this wonderful silence. And he said something which I'll never forget. He said, "You see, the effect of the chanting, the most important part of the chanting, is the silence afterwards." Now, as a young, fervent Hare Krishna preacher, I wasn't terribly happy with that, but I never forgot it, because it is true that sometimes the silence can be, you could say, pregnant with the divine presence. So you just reminded me of that, Danielle, when you said it's not always easy to get people to enter that silence. So sometimes, in fact, not why, sometimes always, I would say, the physical act of chanting out loud in a group, it can be a very powerful awakener for that inner awareness. Very powerful. So why don't you try to get them to chant and then to enter that silence, and it might really work wonders. Anyway, that's just a thought.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we'll close with some chanting, but before we do, I just wanted to share with you that some of you may have heard of Lord Chaitanya. I can see one of you nodding. I don't know if a couple of nods going on. All right. So I recently completed a book which I've been working on for a long time, it's entitled The Eternal Dance of Love, and it is the beautiful life of Lord Chaitanya. And it's a little similar to what I did with the Gita, because I wanted to make it accessible for everyone. So there's no Sanskrit in here, maybe one or two words. I don't know. It's essentially a story, and it's a story which I hope can touch the heart of many. So recently it's come out, it's on Amazon, you can get it there. Although because you're in America and it's printed here in England, so you might need to look on the side of the page where some of the associated sellers, they buy it and they ship it over cheaper and quicker than Amazon can get it to you. Anyway, Eternal Dance of Love, I just wanted to let you know, and if you look it up, you can find out about it online. Because I feel that the story of Lord Chaitanya has yet to really enter the public awareness. There was a book written in the 19th century. I think it was published in about 1890 by Sir Edwin Arnold. He'd been to India and he'd learned about the Buddha. So he wrote a book, A Very Simple Life of the Buddha, and he called it The Light of Asia. And it sold in millions, even back in 1890. People loved it. He kept it very simple. And the story, just, because everyone loves to hear, if it can be told right, I hope I've done it in a good way, just to hear the story of a very special person. Lord Chaitanya's whole life just shone, everything about him. So anyway, I encourage you, if you're remotely interested, see if you can get hold of a copy of that book, and you might like it. Okay, so Shall we sing for 5 or so minutes? Yeah.
Sure, we have a little more time than that. I would personally vote for more than 5 or 10 minutes of chanting if you're willing. I don't know if anyone else agrees, but what do you think?
Okay.
The chanting we already heard was so lovely that I think it would be very nice to have
All right.
maybe 15
Yeah.
minutes, perhaps. Does that sound? Does anyone agree? We have people shaking their heads, so yeah, please.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Um, yeah. This harmonium which I'm playing, it's about 40 years old. I was very lucky because I had a battered harmonium, which I used to let the devotees in the temple use, and it didn't start out battered; it became battered. So one of the devotees, had gone to India, and he came back with this beautiful harmonium, and he said, "Ranchor, we want to give you this because you've allowed us to use yours, and you need a new one." So I've treasured it ever since, and it is said, with musical instruments that they mature over age. So this is one of those. I just need to get it balanced so I can reach everything. So this is a tune which is traditional tune from Bengal, normally referred to as the morning tune, which can kind of evolve as it goes along. So we'll see how we get along. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Shri Radhe Govinda, Govinda. Radhe Govinda, Govinda Radhe, Radhe Govinda, Govinda Radhe, Radhe Shri Ram.